you have such a strong mindset and level of self-belief that it really rubs on to other people, which is amazing. What was the first step that you took to develop the killer mindset that you have today?
I think for me, the start was just listening to podcasts, reading books, diving into self improvement to begin with. But the real day or moment that it was the biggest shift for me was when I invested more money than I had in my bank account into a coaching program to become a coach. Not really knowing what I was doing, but it was the first moment when you invest into yourself, man, there really is something that happens. You've experienced it when we work together. It's like when you invest into yourself financially, you invest into yourself personally, professionally, in every way possible. And it really changes the way you look at yourself. And so that was the moment for me when things really started to happen because it was like, okay, I'm talking about all this stuff of I want people to believe in themselves. I want people to take action. I got to do it first.
100%. And I want to say I've experienced pretty much the exact same thing with it within the past few months. Like, I've honestly been going through kind of a mental rut, and I guess a period where I've been lacking a bit of belief in myself, which is normal. I feel like everybody goes through periods of self-doubt. But I find what has really helped me has been acting with 100% belief and conviction, even though it's not there. Like doing the stuff that I would do if I believe it in myself. For example, moving to Miami, like I just did. I think like that's like it was a very bold move, kind of leaving what I had behind
Hmm.
and making that move, even though I didn't really feel ready and I had some self doubt, really helped me ingrain that belief into myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. I always say I think the best thing that people can do, especially when you're in your 20s, like it's probably your audience, just
Yeah.
younger in general, is take on more than you can handle. Like we always hear, like say no to things, and like just keep that in mind. Like say no to things so you can say yes to the right things. But I think when you're young, I think the best thing you can do is just say yes to everything, because I think a lot of the things, one of the things that we don't really take into perspective is that we can change our mind. There's been many things that I've done in my life where I said yes to something and it wasn't the right thing for me. And so a week after I was like all in on this thing, I decided it wasn't for me. But we take up so much mental space in our brain of what if I could have did this? What if I could have did this? What if I took up this opportunity? And if you just say yes to the thing and then you realize, oh, this wasn't for me, well, then it's out of your brain. And then that mental space of what if isn't there. And then you can go all into the thing. But I think taking on more than you can handle and really seeing what you're capable of is the best way to kind of figure out what you are capable of.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's like when you're young, you might think you have it all figured out, and you might think you know what you want to do with your life,
Mhm.
but 99% of the time you actually don't. So it's good to kind of it's good to just explore as many things as possible because you don't know what you don't know.
And
So
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
like what were you gonna say? You can go.
I was just gonna say I think it's not even that you don't know what you want or whatever it may be, but like you can want something now and then a year from now change your mind. Like I think just be open to changing your mind because what you want right now, your goal of what you think where you'd like to be in 5 years from now might change. And so, I mean, it should change because if you're not evolving and trying out new things, I mean, what really is the purpose of all this to begin with? I mean, like if you're set on one single thing that you want to do, there's so many ways that we can impact the world, at least from my standpoint.
100%. Yeah. So one thing that I've noticed about you is like you're a very short-term thinker, but in a good way.
Mhm.
Like I was listening to a podcast and you were saying you don't know what you want to even do a year from now. And you don't ever have a 5-year plan. So why is that?
I heard we were speaking about Chris Williamson right before this, and I
Yeah.
heard him say something similar where on his recent podcast of like 2.5 million subscribers, like just going over lessons he's learned and questions and stuff like that. And he said the same thing where like every time someone comes on the podcast and asks him, where's he going to be in 5 years from now? He never has an answer because he can't think that far. I think for me, I've seen so much mortality in life, and I think so many people get focused on feeling like they need a broad vision for their life to create it And I think for me, it's just I'm short in my thinking because I'm also short in my actions. Every day I'm focusing on doing the damn thing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so instead of getting so caught in this idea of where I'd like to be in 5 years from now and then taking so much time planning it, you never actually get to taking the action to do it. And so for me, and I know that if I set a goal for 5 years from now, my mind's probably going to change. I'm probably going to change in what I want to do. And so I never get too solidified in what I think I want because it may not be that thing.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it's always good just to like not spend a bunch of time planning and just think about how you can make the most out of today. Be present and think less, which has been it's been something that I've kind of struggled with for a while, and I think especially now that I'm down in Miami, I've been so caught up in trying to think of like the perfect business I can start and like the perfect direction I can take my life. But the thing is, there's no perfect direction. There's no perfect thing I can do. The perfect thing is action, doing something now and moving forward. So, working with you, I gotta say, completely changed my life. And you are definitely a very good mindset coach. So, your whole thing is helping people overcome limiting beliefs and self sabotage. And the thing is, even though it's such an important thing to do, and I think a lot of people want to stop self-sabotaging and kill their limiting beliefs, but they don't really know one, where to start, and two, what those beliefs even are.
Mm.
So, where can someone even start with, or no, I think a better question would be, where did you start with killing your limiting beliefs and taking your mindset to the next level?
I think it was hiring my first coach. Like I said, man, I think like really
Mhm.
investing into myself, it was I think it's funny when we invest into ourselves for most people, it's where they think the work ends. Like, okay,
Yeah.
I've invested into myself now. Now things are just supposed to happen because I invest into myself. Like I bet on myself now. For me, it was the realization that when I invested into myself, that's when the work really started. And I think for a lot of people, I think that that's the perspective you should take is, I mean, the work's never going to end at the end of the day, but that's where it started for me was asking those tough questions because I had someone ask me those tough questions. Like for you, when we started working together, there was a lot of questions that you never even thought of asking yourself. And you start asking yourself those questions to help you get clear on what those limiting beliefs are. And sometimes I think it's really good, a lot of the time, is to get an external perspective. I mean, it's really difficult to see, to overcome a problem when you're so close to it. And that's why I think coaching is so powerful because you are able to get a unbiased external perspective. And that's what I realized for me when because I started coaching at 17. And I thought that a limiting belief I had was I was too young, that I didn't have anything to provide. But what I've found a lot of the time through a lot of the podcasts I've had with exceptional entrepreneurs is they remind me that my perspective is so fresh and so unbiased and so not convoluted with all of the uh, I guess just limiting beliefs that we take on throughout our lives. Because the older we get, the more solidified we get in our beliefs. It's unfortunate that it has to be that way, but because I'm young, I'm always in a state of questioning, and I want to continue in that state. So that's what's been really powerful for me.
Yeah, and I think that it really ties into something that I say a lot in my content. Like, nothing is good or bad. It's just how you make it.
Hmm.
It's just your perspective. Like, for example, I went through like a big period in my life when I just had no self-esteem, couldn't look myself in the mirror. And what I realized was like, yeah, a lot of bad things might have came from that, but also a lot of the good things in my life also came from that. Like, I feel like that's the reason why I'm so ambitious and I just have this desire to do great things. So it really it really comes down to the way that you look at things, and being a young podcaster or a young life coach, that can actually be a strength, like you said, because you have a different perspective and it makes you really stand out compared to all of the ones who are older and maybe repeating some of the same information that might not quite be relevant. So what are some of the other limiting beliefs that you had that you ended up breaking?
I mean, there's so many. There's so many different paths I can go down. There's beliefs around money that I had to overcome that I'm still overcoming that I think a lot of people never overcome. As I said, I have a podcast with a financial psychologist in tomorrow to dive into those things because I think we have so many limiting beliefs around that. There's so many limiting beliefs around if I could be a good speaker, if I could be a good podcaster, if I could be I want to write books one day. Am I even a writer? Like I have to, give evidence to reinforce those. There's so many. There's so many. There's not one that I can think of specifically.
Makes sense. So how have you gone about, or a better question I think would be, how can someone else go about overcoming their limiting beliefs? Like, is there a specific framework that you like to take your clients through or take yourself through?
Hmm. I don't think. I think that the tough part about beliefs is that they're so a part of who we are or who we see ourselves as that there's no right way to overcome limiting beliefs or there's never really a point in time where you fully overcome anything, right? And so I think most of it is just staying in that state of questioning when you find yourself maybe in a rut, like you say, in a place where you feel like things aren't working out, you're not seeing the progress that you want to see, or maybe you are and you still just have that lack of belief. It's like, well, question that. I had a psychotherapist on the podcast a little bit ago, and she was speaking about how when she works with clients and they are in a state of apathy or in that state of just questioning themselves, the thought process is argue the opposite. How can you argue the opposite? So if you're thinking that I'm not confident or I can't do this, it's like, well, how can you argue the opposite? What evidence, what proof do you have to reinforce how you can argue the opposite of that? So if you had to hold yourself as a confident person that wants to show up for themselves and create opportunities for yourself in your life, well, if maybe you don't have any proof, but how could you argue the opposite? What would you have to do to argue the opposite to become that kind of person? Something I just made a reel on this right before we hopped on is that I think that one of the biggest mistakes or things that really holds most people back in their life is that they focus on what they don't want in their life. Like when you really think about it, most of us are looking for what we don't want in our lives. Most of us are chronic complainers. We think about everything that is not going right in our lives. But I think the best thing that I ever did growing up was really just dream massive, like bigger. And that's going back to why I don't think in like 5 year terms, because I know what I think at where I'm going to be in 5 years from now. I'm probably going to be way past that. And so the idea of even a goal, I talk with Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator on the podcast, where he doesn't set goals for his company. He doesn't set goals. His son doesn't set goals. No one in that company sets goals because they're limiting. I mean, it puts you like, okay, I want to shoot for this goal. Then you achieve the goal. Then what do you do next? You shoot for another goal. And so there really is no endpoint to it. But I think really getting clear and thinking about what do you want? What kind of life do you want to live? What do you want your Wednesday to look like on a random day? Like just really thinking about what you want, and you will move towards that rather than thinking about what you don't want, because then you're going to move towards that.
Yeah. Yeah, man. That's awesome. And I I've definitely seen that in my own life. Like I remember once I set a goal to make 10K a month by a certain time.
Hmm.
And then I realized like why 10K a month? Like by setting my mind on that goal, I'm limiting myself. It's like why can't I make 11K or 12K or 50K?
Hmm.
And the only thing limiting me is my mind and the fact that I'm so dead set on that one goal. And I think what that does is it makes you take smaller actions where if you just made your goal 5 or 10 times bigger, you take much bigger actions. Even though you might not achieve that goal that's way bigger than the original one,
Hmm.
you'd still, like, by thinking bigger, you'd definitely achieve more than your original goal. And something that I really admire about you, like I said at the start of the podcast, is you just have a crazy amount of confidence and self-belief, which I'm I'm honestly really struggling with right now.
Hmm.
Just thinking in terms of when instead of if, which I think's a great mindset that you have. So, how do you think I can change my mindset to start developing more of that confidence and start thinking in terms of when?
Yeah, I think it what comes up for me when you say that, and I'd love to let's coach, man. I think this is cool. I think this is a great opportunity to dive into like what you said there when I remember when we worked together and the 10K goal was like such a idea that is like when I hit this, then I'm gonna feel so much better about myself because hey, I hit 10K. Like this is awesome. Like I feel so good. All these people that I look up to, they're doing that. I want to do that. I'm gonna feel good about myself
Yeah.
when it happens. But it's that when it happens that hurts us. And so for you, a question I would ask is what are you waiting to happen for you to feel good about yourself? What has to happen for you to feel good about yourself? And why are you placing that in the future? Why can't that be now?
Oh, that's a good question. That's really testing me. I think money is still definitely a big one.
Hmm.
Money for sure. And also, one thing is definitely living in the US full time because I'm from Canada and it's hard to get a visa to stay in the US longer than 6 months. And what I really want to do is move to Miami or like maybe somewhere else in the US full time. And I feel like right now there's just so much uncertainty
Hmm.
with my living situation. So I'm kind of placing my happiness on that. I'm thinking like, oh, I'm gonna be happy when I have a stable living situation, then I can finally make friends and make more money and all that. But also, it's like at the same time, not having a stable living situation is also a good thing because it adds more uncertainty, and then I guess I can find a lot more happiness in that, like just trying out different places and having having new experiences. Yeah, I think those are the two big things. And also, hmm, also making more friends here is definitely a big thing because I don't really know anyone in Miami. Yeah, I think
Man,
that's a
I was in Hawaii for about 4 months, as you know, and it was uncomfortable for
yeah.
me. It was 5,000 miles away from where I live. And so that was uncomfortable for me as well. I think one thing that I would say is you've already achieved things that you said would make you happy.
That's true. That's very true.
So then what is it that why again, why does it have to be placed in the future? Because that's the downside of being a ambitious person is you're always thinking about when I accomplish this or when I complete this or when I do this, then. And it's the when I then that hurts us so much because you are always placing it on the next thing. So, what would have to happen for you to feel more confident or for you to get out of the rut that you say you're in? What would have to happen for that to be now? And even a better question for that is why does something have to happen?
It's true. I guess nothing really has to happen. It's more just like shifting my mindset and being, like you said, not placing my happiness on any external event. Also, something that I have been thinking about lately has been just like being more patient. putting less pressure on myself because I find I'm putting so much pressure on myself right now to make a lot of money, make a lot of friends, and like do everything that I want so quickly. I'm very impatient about my goals. And I think that is one thing that's definitely holding me back. So being more patient and focusing more on the direction rather than the outcome, like you always talk about.
Yes.
Focusing on how can I make the most out of today, not how can I get to this place that I want to get to as quickly as possible. And something else I want to bring up is like now that I've been in Miami, I've been spending a lot more time alone, but it's been a lot more quality alone time rather than just like I've been, how do I describe this? Like it's been more like instead of being physically with myself, but mentally doing something else like watching a YouTube video or listening to some music. I've been physically and mentally with myself. So it's been a lot more quality. And it's been very helpful because I've discovered a lot of things about myself and made a lot more progress mindset wise. So just for any of the people watching this, something I would recommend would be taking more time to be by yourself, but not being stimulated. Taking more walks, or maybe traveling by yourself, doing something where you're both physically and mentally with yourself because you really learn a lot.
Yeah, you know me more than anyone. Like I
Yeah.
preach on that so much. Um, it's funny when I was in Hawaii, it made me realize that even more because living in New York, living in Miami, we are surrounded by people that are driven to be moving forward to
Oh, for
achieve
sure.
X goal, whatever it is. And that's why I told you like Miami wouldn't I don't think would be a place for me. And Hawaii felt so in alignment was because it was the exact opposite. I mean, dude, like going there, I mean, say we made plans for 4 p.m. People were showing up at 5 p.m. and that's time. Like they were so not regimented in such a way that's so strict and rigid. And I think it's sometimes can be a good thing because it can help you realize that you don't need to be on a specific, you don't need to be doing something every second of your day. You don't need to be grinding away. Like you said earlier, I mean, it's focusing on things that give you more leverage rather than focusing on things at all times. Feeling like you need to be moving just because you're running away from something within yourself to prove something to yourself. And in self improvement, probably a lot of the people that watch this is you're trying to fill a void within yourself through achievement. And what I've realized, and a lot of people will eventually realize, is that is not the solution.
That's so true. Yeah, something I've really noticed about Miami is like everybody is doing something. Everybody is going somewhere. If I walk downtown, everywhere I look, there's like five different business meetings going on. And there's people running to the next place. Like you can tell it's just such a fast-paced city. For better or for worse. Like I think there's a lot of good things about that too. Like it really motivates me
Hmm.
to get on my shit and work as hard as possible, which I think is a great thing. But also like it does put a lot of unneeded pressure on yourself to perform and reach a certain outcome. Something else that I really want to touch on, something that I think you do really well is detachment. And what I've noticed about detachment is like it's less about not caring about a goal, but it's more just about believing in yourself and trusting in the process. Like if you have full confidence in your ability to do something, then you're not going to be super worried about the outcome happening at a certain time or things happening the exact way you want because you're just going to trust the process. You're going to be okay with it. You know it's going to happen in the future, so there's no point in really worrying about that. What do you think's your perspective on that? Like, do you think you agree?
Yeah, I mean, there was a point in time where 10K month was a goal for me too.
Hmm.
And then you achieve it, and you're like, okay, What's next? And when you attach yourself to that, it makes it even harder to achieve. One thing that I think is really good for people to understand from a psychological perspective is when you attach yourself to a goal or a desire, you put it on a pedestal. So for you, it's like, okay, I want to hit 10K a month, and then you hit that 10K a month. It takes a long time to hit that because you put this goal on a pedestal of wow, 10K a month is like a lot of money. Like and for me growing up around a lot of people in New York, 10K is a lot of money for a lot of people. But then I'm speaking with people on the podcast that make 10K in a day, more than 10K in a day. Like I've had people on the podcast that have sold their businesses for hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's not that much money. But because you put it on a pedestal and you attach yourself so much to it that when I achieve this, it's going to be like everything that I'm looking for, you realize it just doesn't matter nearly as much as you thought. And so the detachment idea is just focusing on attach yourself, I guess, to the actions you take every day, not the goal that you want to achieve. It's like focus more on being impatient with action and patient with results. Because that really is all you can control is the inputs. You can't control the outputs. You can't control what comes of whatever you want to achieve, but more so what you do to make that happen. And as soon as you detach yourself from making it happen, you'll realize it starts to happen a lot quicker.
That's so true. Yeah, and I think also attaching yourself to, like you said, attaching yourself to the things that actually give you results, like your skill level at something. Like if you focus on, let's say, let's say you're trying to make it to the NBA. If you attach yourself to being a good basketball player, then I think you'd probably do a lot better than someone who attaches himself to the goal of making it to the NBA.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think most people do it in everyday life, whether they realize it or not. There's so many scenarios, and it isn't just money, that's for sure.
That's so true. So you've talked to hundreds of highly successful people on your podcast, which I, I still think is crazy. Or actually,
Me
I
too.
I just want to add, like, I was just thinking, like, I've I've talked to so many cool people on this podcast, and I realized like it didn't take any skill. The only thing it took was belief and opening my mind up to the possibility that I can talk to these cool people. And there's literally nothing stopping me. And I think that's what's stopping a lot of other people from achieving big things or talking to the people that they want. But anyways, back to the question. So, has there been one podcast you've done or guest that you've spoken to that has really transformed your life and put you and your podcast in a different direction?
I wouldn't say so. I don't think there's anyone that's stood out amongst the others. I think that's why I love podcasting so much because it's one of these things where every single week I get to speak to a new cool person. And at the end of the day, that's the detachment part of it is like all I care about is if I can have a cool conversation with a cool person, that's all I care about. I really don't care too much about how many, like getting more views. Is that great? Absolutely. Is it reaching more people? Like that's at the end of the day, of course, I have that goal of wanting to reach more people, but there's no one that stands out amongst any of them because everyone's in a different field doing something different, impacting the world in maybe a similar way, but doing it in their own way. So not necessarily no.
What do you think have been what do you think have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned from the guests on your podcast?
I think the biggest one is similar to you, where it's like these people you put on pedestals that are they've achieved something amazing. Like I had a Tyler Henry, the Hollywood Medium, on my podcast recently, and he has a really engaged audience. I think it's at about 38,000 views or something like that. And I'm getting every single day, I'm getting comments of people saying amazing things about me and about Tyler. And I'm reminded that every single person I've ever spoken to that people put on a pedestal or give too much emphasis on this isn't even a person. Like this is an idea of the person more so. And that's what a lot of it is. Um, it's just helped me realize that these are just humans. I mean, every single person I've ever spoken to, no matter what they've accomplished or done, it's a human at the end of the day. And I think reminding myself of that um, not only grounds me, but reminds me that uh, there's nothing that I can do or achieve or accomplish or no amount of money I can make that will ever change the way I feel about myself. And I wouldn't want it to. Um, because at the end of the day, these are people. Like every single person you've ever looked up to that you put on a pedestal is a human being similar to you. Maybe they've done amazing things, maybe they've accomplished amazing things. Doesn't make them any more non-human, but we see it as such.
Yeah, true. And it really is all about perspective. Like, if you view someone as just a regular person, someone who's like you but a little bit older, then you're gonna approach the conversation in a much different way than you would if you looked at them as like some god or some guy who's way better than you.
And most of the time, we don't even realize we're doing it. Like most of the time,
Right.
we really realize that we put people on pedestals. But when you hear people speak about people that are doing amazing things, like the way that people speak about Hormozy blows me away. Because at the end of the day, this dude has trauma. This dude has things he's going through, just like every other person. Has he built $1 million or multi-million dollar companies? For sure. But there's so many people that have done that. And there's so many people that you don't even know that maybe make more money than Alex Hormozy. But you wouldn't put them on a pedestal because you don't even know who they are. And so, yeah, man, I think it's a good reminder for sure that people are just people at the end of the day. And when you realize that, it helps you think bigger for yourself because you realize, well, this person's just a human. I'm just a human. If they were able to do it, it goes back to everything that I want to do. It's like you can too. Like we just have to believe in ourselves just as much as we believe in other people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think a huge benefit that I've got from doing the podcast, which I'm sure that you've got as well, is like when you're around these people, it really changes what you believe is possible. Because if you're talking to some guy who sold his business for millions of dollars and you realize he's just a regular person, you're like, why can't I do this as well? And yeah, like we were talking about before the podcast, I think I've learned more just from being around cool people and kind of through osmosis
Hmm.
than I've learned through reading a book or receiving information in some way. For example, when we did the coaching, I think most of the benefit that I got from you coaching me wasn't any of the advice that you gave me. It was more just seeing what you've done and realizing that I could do the exact same thing.
Absolutely, there is so much power in proximity. Um, there's no advice that I can give anyone that's going to make them change their lives. I mean, I say it 1,000 times, and a big, limiting belief I think a lot of people have is uh, coaches are the people that are going to give you the advice. But as you know, I mean, we did it earlier in this podcast. I'm just asking really tough questions because I can
Yeah.
give you that perspective that you need, that most people need, that I need. I mean, there's a reason I invest into myself. Like, there's never going to be a point where I don't. And I think, yeah, I think it's really power. There's power in proximity because you realize how much your mind is able to expand when you are surrounded by people that are doing things like you said earlier. It's like, okay, I want to make 10K a month, but then you start surrounding yourself with people that are making 100K a month, and then you have to think way different. I mean, I have 10x is easier than 2x behind me. I know that was a big book for you. I spoke with Benjamin Hardy. Like, being around that is cool. I have his phone number uh, in my phone. It's like I have contact with that person now, and so my brain automatically opens because I once put that person on a pedestal. And the same thing goes for, I mean, anyone really.
100%. 100%. And that's part of the reason why I moved to Miami. Just like being around all of the people here and walking outside, seeing a supercar wherever you go, it really opens your mind up and it really tricks your mind, or not really tricks your mind, it really shows your mind that this kind of stuff is normal. And you shouldn't fantasize about it because it's right there. Like you walk on the street and there's guys who are worth millions of dollars. Like you go to the gym and There's millionaires and people who have achieved great things just working out right next to you. So it shows you how that is such a normal thing, and there's no reason that you can't do it either.
Yeah, I think what's cool about it too is I spent about 4 months in a mansion in Hawaii that
Yeah.
was probably worth $12 million, probably more honestly at this point. And it made me realize I don't really care. I don't care nearly as much as I thought I did about having things or achieving having a nice car or having a nice house or anything like that. Is it nice? Is it, additional? For sure. But I think we put too much emphasis on those things. Like I don't care about having a supercar or having a massive mansion. It's just me. So like, why do I need 10 rooms? Like when I see people that are in the NFL that just get multi-million dollar contracts and then they go buy a mansion to live with themselves, it's like that just it's like you get it just to say that you got it. And for me, I just don't care how I don't care as much as how I'm perceived. Rather, I care more about how I perceive myself.
That's so good. How did you make that mental shift? Because I think that's really hard for a lot of people.
Well, I think you can't really denounce your desires. So achieving that, living in a house that was a mansion in Hawaii. I mean, dude, my goal when I was growing up, I watched Hawaii Five O like religiously, and just going to Hawaii was like dream of mine. Doing that at 20 years old, it helped me realize more and more of like we put these things on pedestals, and then you don't realize how not easy they are to achieve because obviously luck plays a role, but how much just like anything, whatever you think is going to make you happy or think is going to make you feel better about yourself or whatever it is, it's just not. It might for a period of time, but it's definitely not sustainable.
Yeah, totally. Because your mind just warms up to it. Like after a few days, it becomes the new normal.
Yeah,
Like I
absolutely.
think there was some study that I think Alex Hormozy might have said this on Modern Wisdom, but it was like if somebody gets into an accident and they become a paraplegic, they after a couple months, their happiness goes back to what it was before.
Yeah.
And they're no less happy than they were when they were fully able.
Yeah, I had blanking on her name at this moment right now. But I had someone on the podcast that was a professor at Yale, and she wrote a
Yeah.
book on happiness as well. And there's this idea of there's the hedonic treadmill that we know that like we're always going to the next thing. You're on a treadmill, the next thing is going to be the thing that fills the void within myself. Never works. But there's also hedonic adaptation, right? After 2 months of living in that house, it was normal to me. It's just that's the house I'm living in now. It doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. So everything becomes normalized to you after a while. And that's why again, it's the emphasis on achieving things or achieving a certain amount of money. It's like, okay, you make 10K, then you make 10K every month, then it's normal. Then it's like, okay, what do I do next? I shoot for 50K? Like it's never going to fill that void. It just won't.
Yeah, definitely. It's very good that you learned that lesson early on because some people go their whole lives and then only learn it when they're sitting on their deathbed and it's too late. So that leads me to the last question that I like to ask all the guests that come on this podcast. What do you want to do before you die?
Impact people. Honestly, I mean, like, and I think I'm doing that, but I'd love to do it at a a bigger perspective. Because I mean, like you said in the beginning of this podcast, I've inspired you by just living my life, and so if I can do that for more people, uh, there's a light inside of me that just lights up when I hear that impacting people or that I've inspired them to do something. Because a lot of the time we're so caught up in ourselves and what we're doing that we forget that we're impacting people, even if we don't realize it. So just impact more people, man. Honestly, I mean, I really want the you can too like perspective. I want to live that out for myself, so other people can live that out for themselves. Because, like you said, we get to the end of our lives a lot more regret than we do things that we're grateful for that we did. And so, if I can just encourage a little bit more people to live for today and not live for some desired idea of the future, um, that'd be a win for me.
Anyways, James, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was a great way to end it off. If you liked what you heard, go check him out in the show notes below, and I'll see you guys later. Appreciate you for coming on, James.
Always, brother.